Hello, and welcome to the Screen Stoop podcast. We've been gone for a week. Sorry about that. Shelby was volunteering at the Special Olympics, and we bought a bookshelf, and I was really sick from my brain treatment.
Yeah, it's been a busy weekend.
Last weekend was a busy weekend.
Yeah.
But we're back to review The Crowded Room, Episode 5 and Episode 6. So we'll kind of start with 5. I don't think was much overlap in the episodes, for content. So it actually would be kind of easy to review both at the same time.
Yeah, actually based off the cliffhanger of episode 4 and all of episode 5, I was so confused as to whether or not we skipped an episode because there was nothing to move on from the cliffhanger. Yeah. I was just so confused.
The biggest point, purpose, revelation of episode 5 and 6 is I was right. Called it.
Yes, you were.
I wrote the script. Wow! Applause, applause. I won. Go back to my show, The Crowded Room, episode 3, posted June 11th. You're welcome at 7 minutes and 7 seconds. I predicted Danny's not real. He's a dissociation that was created and used with the sexual abuse. Super textbook. It wasn't that hard to predict for anyone that likes psychology or studied it or has even just been to a therapist themselves. But I called it.
Yeah, you called it. But you mean Adam, right?
Not Danny. Shoot. Yeah. Oh, what? I ruined my. Yeah. I ruined my acceptance speech.
Yeah, but it's okay. Things happen. You still won.
Bummer. Okay, well.
This happens when you gloat too much.
Yeah, I took the air right out of my balloon.
What?
You know, it makes a farting sound. Let's begin at episode 5. The young boys in quotes, as if Adam's real. There is split custody between the dad, and that's when I knew for sure. I mean, I for sure knew episode 3, but it was just so easy to pick out. It was actually kind of frustrating. The show thought we were so stupid. They kept trying to make it look like Adam was real with these kind of sly phrases that the characters would say. And Shelby even questioned it. And I just said, no, don't let the show trick you with its clever little words. We already know. We know Adam's not real.
I really wanted him to be real just so you weren't right.
And then you also, in the episode 6, you said the same thing about Ariana. And you're like, maybe she is real. And I said, no, do not let this show play with you. When they said a girl kept leaving, it's Annabelle. It's not Ariana. We had an entire episode where she's going out and we were like, this is Danny.
I know. I think I want, because of how easy it was to guess
I know everything. It's not fun.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping there was some other twist. But I got to remember that the show wasn't just written and created out of thin air. It's based off of someone's life. So the facts have to be somewhat realistic.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's epic that we guessed it all, but also it kind of takes we were saying, oh, we're going to look so stupid if we're wrong. However, it's not as fun when you're not wrong.
It kind of shows you how simple life truly is, though. It's not all twists and secrets and stuff like that. It's pretty simple, cut and dry. This man just had a psychological issue.
Yeah.
There's no twist. This is someone's life. It's not like the movies.
I know. I'm coming from Pretty Little Liars level of guessing, where it's like, oh my God, there's a twin you've never heard of. How are you supposed to predict that?
Life is never that dramatic and never has those kinds of twists.
Yeah. So back to the shared or split custody with the fake dad, because the dad's not here. Dad went out for a pack of cigarettes and never came back. But Adam's going over there. And it was so stupid because Adam isn't at school the first day in 3rd grade when Danny goes to school. And then the next day, Adam runs from the middle of the street to meet him at the bus stop. Why wouldn't these boys be hanging out constantly?
It's actually not even the next day. It's the following week.
So Danny solo is going to the 3rd grade. They're at some sort of bake sale, and Bill is evil. Die, Bill, die. Choke on your cookies. And then the principal was weird about Danny's dad after Danny got sent to the principal's office. That was kind of odd. I thought, oh, is the dad a criminal? Is the dad a serial killer? What? Because it seemed like it was more than just your dad's absent. You don't have one.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be like you said, maybe he's a criminal or maybe he's in a psych ward because he himself is insane. And so there's some kind of biological
genetic
factor. Yeah.
So I keep thinking, oh, I'm trying to predict more stuff, but the show's going to end. Isn't there only one more episode? 2 more episodes?
Maybe, but there might be a second season.
Oh gosh, this show, that's something else that I wanted to say, is that this show did not need to be dragged out this long. Like I said, I called it in episode 3. And the past 2 episodes, they could have been cut out. All of the previous stuff we already saw, just put it into one. Like, it seemed with the swelling music and the close-up shots, like they wanted us to have this, oh, ha-ha moment. And it was easy to find. We're not getting that.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked it because it was like a slow burn. Even when like it felt like they were slowly unveiling everything, which I get what you're saying. Like it wasn't like an aha moment for us because we had already.
It's like when Dora finds Swiper, you're not like, whoa, that was so good. It's like, yeah, obviously it's right there.
Yeah, he's been there the whole time. You were looking at him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mom Candy named Ghost House. I thought that was kind of cute. That's why Danny calls it Ghost House, because people are moving out, and she said, oh, maybe ghosts are going to live there now. So I thought that was nice. The makeup table camera shot with the mirror and the changing focus when Candy was getting dressed, I thought was really cool. But I also thought you're kind of exposing your child to inappropriate like context getting dressed in front of your kid. It was a little bit voyeuristic having Danny watch his mother undress. I just don't think that that's appropriate. I think it's kind of sexualization or like sexual exposure too young for a child.
I think that instance plays into a next scene and then plays into like the final big life-changing moment for him.
Yeah, so maybe it wasn't just the one factor, it was compounding factors.
Yeah, because there's plenty of people who have like said that they've seen like their parents get dressed or something. It's not that big of a deal. Someone's just getting dressed. There was no nudity. But then there are stories I've heard of like people like, oh, they actually walked in with like their mom and dad or something, and that was like life-changing for them. And then there's what happened to him that's like even
so you're
worse.
saying,
so
okay,
it slowly escalates.
So you started with the mom getting undressed in front of Danny, and Danny kind of standing outside the door, and then the Marlin having sex with the Marlin having sex he's a fish, like he's a big huge fish on top of Candy.
Looked like a fish.
So Marlin having sex with Danny's mom, and he's outside the door watching, kind of voyeuristic again, and then the final crescendo with him or Adam, the dissociation of him outside or inside of the barn with Marlin, getting touched, raped, molested, and then him outside looking into the barn once again. It was like the trifecta, Trinity.
Yeah, because the first one was more like an innocent thing of like a single mom trying to take care of her kid while trying to get ready for her second job that she's doing to provide for her kid. And the next one is his first initial exposure to sex.
It just felt weird the way they did it. Like she took off her clothes very slowly. It wasn't like when we get dressed, it's like, okay.
And it could have been from his perspective. In his head, it might be playing out that way.
That was something that I wanted to say, is that Danny seems to angelify or angelize his mom.
He's got some mommy issues.
Yeah, especially proven when we see her in episode 6, and she doesn't look anything like the kind of golden goddess that she's been in Danny's memory and recounting all these moments.
Yeah, I thought it was a completely different person.
Yeah, she's much more disheveled, more what I would picture as like a single struggling mom that keeps hooking up with these bad guys.
I think you see that too the following morning after he is watching Marlon have sex with his mom. He's like off put by it. He's almost feels like he's been betrayed because he just like walks and won't talk to her.
Oh, so you think that it's like a little jealousy?
Yeah, I think it was mainly because he's like in love with his mom because that's all he knows. His mom is the only person who's nice to him because he's different than everyone else. His mom says he has like a major imagination, which is probably a link to his psychological issues, but they're not fully fleshed out yet. And then these following moments are what is fleshing it out.
I think that is kind of telling with like a psychological issue that you kind of traumatize your child if you are a single parent and you lean too much on your child. It damages them because the parent is needing something, and so they look for that in their child, but the child isn't ready for that type of relationship and burden. And so I think you're right. That kind of, there's a lot of different psychological conditions that could stem off from that. It doesn't mean that she was not loving or wrong, especially in like the 1970s. People didn't understand psychology like they do today. The mom just thinks that she's loving her child, but sometimes loving your child too much and being too dependent on them will stunt them or have some sort of effect, like you're saying, where now this little boy is kind of in love with his mom and he's way too attached to his mom. And it's better for kids to like go out and learn these type of lessons with their own social group, and they need to go do that with other kids their own age at their own kind of level of understanding.
Yeah, and that's the other issue, is that it's not entirely her fault because everyone his age you see bullies him and makes fun of him. She's the only one that shows any kind of affection or love for him, so it's not surprising that he ended up falling in love with his mom.
And he has to have some sort of traumatic kind of starter base in order to have created Adam in the first place. So he must have done that out of like the loneliness and not being able
Yeah,
to
and
connect with any kids.
It could have been the divorce from his mom and dad because that's traumatizing to children all the time. And that
yeah.
could have been enough to be
Not so much
to
divorce,
create-
but abandonment,
Yeah.
I think.
He might have been close to his dad. His dad left. Now he needed a friend. He created
Because you
Adam.
can have a divorce and two parents that are completely loving and they're
Yeah.
both active in a child's life. I don't think that would... a divorce is obviously not good for kids, but I don't think that it's as detrimental as a full-on parent just leaving.
Yeah.
And then we also kind of touch on a little bit of irresponsibility based on the mom taking Danny to the bar and kind of exposing him to more adult things and more adult themes that he's not ready for. That's why children aren't allowed in bars.
Yeah. Danny actually says that he thinks that blood, because he gets sprayed with blood from the fight. He says that blood might have been like the turning point because of like old like biblical facts of like blood being like inviting.
Well, I just think that
evil
kids aren't ready for that type of violence and that type of behavior, which is why, you don't show a third grader an R-rated movie
and
or something.
That's what I'm getting at, is that night was his, like the night he walked in on Marlon and his mom. That was his introduction to sex, right?
Yeah.
This is his first introduction to actual violence.
Yeah, so-
and he might think that this is not how you do things.
He just had a lot of exposure to stuff that his child brain wasn't ready for.
No. And, the 70s are a different time. It's hard. Like, what do you do in that situation? You can't afford a nanny, but you work your
Well,
job.
I think that a lot of times the kids just stayed home, but he didn't want to stay home, which is weird because it was a little manufactured. Wouldn't he just have Adam come over? Like, why would he even ask his mom if Adam could come over? Because Adam was sleeping over in the first part, and now Adam can't come over. It just
you're
seems
trying to understand someone's psychologically ill brain.
Well, I'm trying to say that this character that they've created, I don't really see the plausibility of, well, Adam's sleeping over one night without my mom's permission, but he can't come over the next day while my mom goes to work to spend the night. Like, it's a manufactured imaginary friend.
Well, his imaginary friend is his twin brother who's off living with his dad right now. He might not be able
It's
to come
just
over
a
that night.
weird parameter that I don't know is plausible.
Yeah, I understand that, but we haven't. This is the other issues. We haven't read the book. So if the actual guy said that this happened, then it happened.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the writers or the director saying that this happened. It might have actually happened in this guy's
in the
head.
book.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's based on true events.
Yeah, so, okay, erase everything I just said. I can't judge the TV show for that. I did like, though, when Raya kind of called Danny on the whole Marlon being some sort of corrections officer or counselor, and then coming to the bar and having this whole conversation and night with his mom. And she's like, you couldn't have known all of that. Like, you've kind of made up this story in your head. And then he has that line about, well, you know stuff because you've watched it or because you've heard it. But there's so much added detail to this that how could you have...
Yeah, and that's the thing, is at the time he saw Marlon as like a savior, so he might have twisted it in a sense of like this good man coming to his mom's life because she needs help, and so he's kind of romanticized maybe a story that she has told
That's
him.
what I'm saying, is that I wonder if in his brain, because he has the kind of coping mechanism of making everything seem better with his own imagination, having these personal saviors in the dissociated identities, so he might be also romanticizing life or kind of lying to himself in order to create a better picture.
Yeah.
After the Danny seeing mom and Marlon sex, I wrote down, I'm glad I didn't do a show on episode 5 because it sucks. Where is the murder? I thought we would get bodies by the end of this TV show.
Yeah, that's why there might be a second season. Or this guy might have not actually killed anybody. It might just be a story about one of the first like documented
well, that's what episode 6 would lead you to
disorders.
believe, but why did we get all of those floating bodies in some underwater construction house?
Maybe they were, because you don't see Yitzhak or Ariana, maybe they're in his head. Maybe that is like his personalities that he's killed off in his head.
Okay.
Because they betrayed him or no longer needed him.
But the detectives keep dropping serial killer. So I'm led to believe that he's done something more sinister than just be insane.
Yeah. And he very well could be. I'm thinking that if there's no bodies, they might have been saying serial killer because he has the potential of being one. Mm-hmm. And so and because they don't understand psychology, they're just labeling him as this nut job who has a potential of killing multiple people. Therefore, he's a serial killer.
Okay. There was this idea with Raya where she keeps using these very proper terms about patients or about disorders. And there was that scene in episode 6 where the lawyer says crazy. And she said something like, that's an improper or impolite or something term.
Yeah, it's not a very helpful term.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it's just because, like, I guess I did get in trouble a lot when I was institutionalized in group therapy and stuff because I kept using the word fat around a bunch of anorexics, and I kept saying, like, I'm crazy. You're offensive because both your parents were mentally handicapped or whatever the proper term is now, and you use the word retarded, like, to describe them. And it's kind of weird to me that it just seems a little unnatural. I think that when people are really going through this stuff, they use just whatever comes to their head. Like, I'm very critical of the fact that my brain is disordered. Like, that makes me not okay, but I'm not trying to kind of sugarcoat it.
Yeah, beat around the bush. I think that's the thing, right? Not everyone is like you, and maybe she's worried that he's saying that stuff in front of Danny and someone who's obviously he's aware of it because his personalities are aware of it. Like, Jack is aware of it. So if they bring that to the forefront, she kind of explains, I can't remember if it's this episode or the next episode, that if Danny is told that he has this disorder before he's ready, he could have a mental breakdown. And so I think that's what she's worried about, is him saying Danny is a nut job or crazy or insane to his face, Danny losing it and actually killing him or not being able to talk anymore so they can't help him because he's just completely, like, broke down.
No, you're right. Okay, you're so much more kind, because now I'm thinking about it. Okay, when I was, like, chained up to a hospital bed and everything, if someone would have walked in and called me fat at that moment, I would have then not been responsive to, like, it wouldn't have been helpful to the doctors. They wouldn't have been able to have a normal conversation.
You would have became defensive.
Yeah, I would have been, like, screaming
aggressive.
and refused all my food and got the tube and everything. So I think you're correct. If you walked up to your dad and called him,
people did. He got furious.
Yeah. And so so you're right. I think that it probably I was being not sensitive and not critical because that's the way that I talk to myself, and that's just kind of the way that I interact with the world. But you are right that that's why they would be a little bit more proper and not want to.
Yeah, there's certain ways, and some people can handle it. You just have to, like she's doing, she has a session with them, and you have to kind of judge, are they, like, realistic and logical, or are they, like, to the point to where you have to kind of sugarcoat things for a second?
I was just wondering if it was the TV show saying, baby everybody and live in a fluffy pillow, world.
I don't think so, because it's like you see somebody who says he sees ghosts all the time. You're not gonna call him crazy and that he's lying. You're gonna help him to understand, like, okay, what are you seeing? Why are you seeing it? What traumas have you, like, gone through in your life? And then you find out, like, for me, like, oh, my dad died when I was young. I would really want to see him, so I started seeing his ghosts everywhere. Well, it's because my brain, I'm so depressed and feel so lonely that I want to be with him, that my brain has now adapted to see him so that I'm not alone. I'm not really seeing ghosts, though. But I don't understand that. And so if you were to tell me that I'm just crazy or whatever, I'm going to say, no, BS, he's there, I can see him, and I'm going to go crazy.
I was just kind of wondering, are we being real and raw about drug use and sexual assault, but then we're sugarcoating, like, the terms that we use around mental disorders? Like, she kept saying, you're sick. And that would make me so mad when people would come up to me and say, it's not your fault, you're sick. Because I kind of also chose it. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just the way that I think.
It's hard to, and you also got to take into factor the times of this, right? You're in the 70s or
well, that's
80s,
why it felt really weird, because it almost is like you're using today's terminology and today's kid gloves in a 70s world, where in the 70s they would have just, like, I'm pretty sure in 1960, idiot and stuff was taken out of the medical term for mentally handicapped people, and they actually used the word retarded instead. Like, that was now the medical term in the 1960s. And then it wasn't until, like, the 2000s that then they used handicapped, and then, like, 2020 they handicapped isn't okay now. Like, the terms have kept changing, and so I almost felt like they were painting something in the 70s with a really nice 2023 terminology. Maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand. I just don't know the history of the terminology, and I feel like they did a pretty good job of people outside the field.
The DSM-5 book was basically a driver's manual. I don't think they had that many terms.
Yeah. Well, and that's, like I said, you get to see it with the lawyer being super insensitive, and that's probably because he's just a normal person. People back then talked like that all the time. I think maybe she's a little more sensitive to it, not just because of her field, but because she is trying to, mainly in a selfish way, get her grant. Right. And so she's going to do everything she can to be as friendly as possible to Danny to benefit her as much as him.
Yeah, I think I'm just harping too much on this point. No one's going to care. So when Adam ran to catch the bus with Danny, I said, what is this fake child living situation? It's obviously not real. If they catch the same bus, why couldn't they hang out? Why wasn't Adam at the bake sale with Meanie Bill?
Yeah, and at that point, I kind of realized, like, you know what? They said that he was living with his dad. Adam was with his dad. His dad lives in a different city, state, county, wherever. They don't really explain that, but they do say his dad's going to London. Adam would not go to that school. He would not be enrolled. So he could not go to that school.
Yeah.
Most situations like that, when you have a sibling and they visit you for the weekend or the week, do not go to school. They actually get to stay home and do whatever because they're not enrolled. They can't. And then I thought about when Danny was asleep on his bed, woke up and walked over and like watched his mom and Marlene have sex. There was no bunk bed.
Oh, yeah, you caught that.
Yeah.
I was going to say that in like a big exclamation, but
Yeah.
as a good job because you caught that, there was bunk beds in the beginning, and then now Danny has a single bed.
And no parent that is divorced or split up who has two children and one living with the other parent that visits gets rid of the bunk bed if the siblings are close. They keep it so when the sibling comes over, they get to sleep in the same room.
Candy's not up there doing construction and like taking down the bunk bed.
Yeah.
What was that movie? Was it Step Brothers where they were like really,
Yeah,
they
they're
couldn't even build a bunk bed?
They got super excited for the bunk bed.
Yeah.
The bunk bed falls. It's like, oh God, there's blood everywhere. I'm bleeding to death. And it's just this tiny little finger cut.
I know. So the guidance counselor is even more evil than Bill. And I just kept writing, I will murder him. I will murder him if he touches Danny.
Oh, yeah, that guy was creepy.
He looked like a creep. He sounded like a creep.
They got me here. I thought this was going to be, and at this point, it has been a week, so maybe he already has touched Danny because of that line where he said he thought Marlon was supposed to be like the savior from the monsters, but monsters were already there, and you got confused saying, well...
Why? I said, why wouldn't you say the monster was Marlon?
Yeah, instead of saying monsters are here, maybe the guidance counselor was the monster that was already there.
And he was already touching him.
And he was already being touched.
Maybe that was why.
And that would also explain why Danny, who has been groomed basically for who knows how long since he was with the guidance counselor, didn't put much of a fight.
Yeah.
Put up much of a fight against Marlon.
Well, I thought, yes, that's what I also tracked that I thought it was interesting that Marlon didn't show any interest in molesting Danny until he realized, this kid is going to be very submissive and not do anything.
Yeah, and it kind of proved it too when he asked Danny like what was going on in there, and Danny said, nothing.
Yeah.
So he's already been trained to lie and not talk about these sexual things that are happening to him.
Yep.
So Marlon just took it a step further because he has the privacy of a barn.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, like, I got, touched in adolescence and all that, and I don't think that people understand, like, how this situation makes you kind of feel like it's your fault or like you can't fight back when it's an adult or a parent, and you just kind of have to sit there and take it because you know that, like, inside you know that this isn't right, but if it's someone that's you're supposed to trust and that
they're supposed to protect you and stuff.
Yeah, it feels really it feels like it's almost not happening until it's kind of over, and then you're kind of sick and you don't feel okay, and then later you have all these consequences that show up
damaging.
And make you go to the hospital. It was also really apparent that Marlon's not even addressing Adam in the car. Adam's not really even in a car seat. Adam's not there, and then Marlon's only interested in getting Danny out of the car to go to the barn. Adam runs up and takes it.
Yeah, a predator like that doesn't do that when there's another kid around.
Yeah.
Either because of the risk. Mm-hmm. He would have to kill one of them or something. And then how do you explain that to a mom who had two sons?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of evidence that Adam was definitely fake, like you called.
And then the camera almost strategically is placed very far away from the barn when Adam says, no, I'm going to go instead. And Marlon yells, and he hits his own hand, but he yells directly at Danny, like, stop it or shut up or something.
Yeah. I just also want to say for the record that I agreed with you that Adam was fake, but I wanted you to be wrong so badly. Because you're always right about this stuff. So
I also wanted to say that, like, that I really liked that moment where Marlon kind of lost it because, like, I've experienced that where you even put up a little bit of resistance to something that shouldn't be happening to you, and the just sudden outburst of kind of power and the fear that goes through you, it makes you now say, okay, I just have to get through this.
Yeah, it shows how easy the mask on someone can slip. Like, he had this persona of being such a nice guy and a savior.
And he's just like, I just want to show you this and everything. And it doesn't feel right. And there was like a little warning in the front of this. And I just talked about how, like, don't sugarcoat stuff. Yeah. But it was a little bit like, it wasn't sensitive. I wasn't sensitive. I wasn't saying, this is triggering to me. I just wanted to note that, like, they did get all of those aspects of the lead up to a really abusive moment correct. And then I just wrote down, I told everyone, I made a podcast where I said it. Danny disassociated and Adam gets molested. Danny's conscious doesn't have to deal. It protected itself from the trauma. Super cool.
Yep.
You did some research about the fireflies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Symbolism?
Yeah, I was trying to find it because they made it such a, like...
Prominent
feature in a moment in the episode. So I was looking at if there was any symbolism behind the firefly, and one of them was like any small moment can change your life or something like that, which I don't quite think fits there because that's not a small moment to me. I think that's a very drastic and a like huge deal that's going on in that barn. But
it symbolizes a like different
insects in general symbolizes death and rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Adam was innocent Danny. The death of innocent Danny has now rebirthed.
Yeah.
This psychologically damaged Danny.
Mm-hmm.
So
his innocence, his childhood died.
Yeah, that day and that week and forever how long it happened.
Now we're in episode 6. So Raya's outfits are fire. Her trauma dissociation talk in the beginning of the episode, I thought it resonates with the topic of the TV show, but it's very rudimentary and wouldn't be anything more than a day 1 Psych 101 class. It was not something profound. It's also something that like a very first session with a therapist would go over with you. So I just thought, you're heralded in this context as an awesome professor, but what you're speaking about, these students should already know if you were doing your job.
I mean, it's a new disorder, though, that hasn't been discovered. These are
That's
just theories.
true. So I'm looking at it in the lens of 2023.
Yeah, you got to remember this is the times, and they say it over and over. This disorder, that's the reason why she didn't get the grant. There's no evidence behind the disorder. It's a very, very rare disorder, they said.
No, you're absolutely right that the times were different because I am only 28 and I think, everything is so advanced and everyone is so self-aware and we all are accepting of all of these different disorders and stuff and we're trying to live in the same world together. And it's funny because I was just going over this with my dad yesterday. He was looking into psychiatrists that could treat his trauma from having his wife, my mother, with really abusive borderline personality disorder. And he was telling me it was really funny when I was going through the list of things that they offer. One of the things that the psychiatrist dealt with is loss of a pet. And he just thought that would have never happened when I was growing up. And he said, remember when our dog died? It was such a big thing. And I think I talked about it on a different podcast, like how traumatic that was. And he said, you would have benefited so much from going and seeing a therapist when Dutch died. And I said, yeah, but he said, I would have just got punched in the face and told to suck it up and stop crying. And so we live in such different times now.
Yeah, there's better understanding of the brain and like, especially I think dogs a lot. People get very attached to dogs. That's why society can watch a movie with someone dying and not cry, but then they see a pet die and they like bawl their eyes out. We get so emotionally attached to like our pets.
Yeah.
It's like losing a family member.
Well, I wonder if there's something to deal with a pet, if it's kind of a constant source of love and affection. And then when you lose that, it seems like you're not worth as much anymore. I just wonder if there's some sort of connection there.
I guess it's a good thing.
Because there's a constant affirmation about the dog just loving you no matter what you look like, no matter who you are. And human beings don't do that. It's all very transactional. And so I just wonder if maybe that's why we attach so much to these little things.
Well, most human beings don't do that. A good human being loves you unconditionally and helps you out. It's not.
Yes.
Conditional love is not love.
I also wrote down, was female discrimination this bad in the late 70s? It's crazy because, like I said, we're only 28. But I'm honestly asking because it seems so primitive to me.
When was it women's suffrage in the 60s?
No. Women's suffrage was in the 20s.
I think it was still a pretty big thing because you still had like slavery ended a long time ago, but then they still have issues with mixed racials, like
latent feelings.
In the
and
bar,
prejudices.
those black people came in and was sat at the bar, and that white guy had a huge issue with them and was like, "You don't need to be here." Who said you could talk to that kid? So just because like
the fact that everyone didn't poke that guy's eyes out with a pool stick just for being that aggressive bothered me.
Yeah, it shows you times have definitely changed. We're no longer like that, thankfully. But that's what I'm getting at is the women's suffrage may have like allowed women to vote and things, given them more rights, but then it wasn't until much later that they started having big careers like a professor at a college.
Yeah. So Raya is approached by the detective that we've been following this entire time, and he recruits her after her lecture. They go talk about Danny. They're in the police station from the first episode. They mention the wouldn't serve thing and also not good for the cause. That was a phrase that we didn't have.
Yeah, well, I think because wouldn't serve is what I grabbed onto.
So the cause is going to be protection of Danny. That's it. Yeah. That's the only thing.
I think that...
I was hoping it was like a bigger purpose. Like we're sacrificing bodies or something. We're killing bad people. We're killing rapists. We're something cooler than just we're protecting Danny's conscious mind.
Yeah, protecting his psyche. And well, that's the thing though. It's realistic. It's not as dramatic as a movie or a fake TV show.
That's why I watch TV.
I know, but I find this stuff way more interesting.
So the wouldn't serve phrase, no one is listening to this podcast, but Shelberthy has been saying wouldn't serve and doesn't serve constantly, incessantly to me since episode 1 in our daily life. Like in public, to a cashier, just whenever he can get that phrase in. And it is so weird because no one understands and you just sound like a psychopath.
Exactly.
So this is where I was actually wrong. They have not found any bodies in this case. So I'm confused as what the basis they have here for keeping Danny and bringing, not just keeping Danny, because Danny obviously shot up a public place. He should go to jail. But Raya, why is she being roped in thinking he is a serial killer? Because other than this kid acting weird, I'm sure they had weird tweakers back then. There's not really any reason to suspect that this guy is a serial killer. And I like that they had the other detective say, he's just some high guy. Like, why? That it's weird, especially because the detective didn't track that Danny was pretending to have an English accent. Maybe if that was the case and you had some sort of really great James McAvoy type of switch between like a really proper English like mother and then like a crazy little boy, that would be an indicator of like this guy is mentally insane.
Well, so that's the thing, right? I don't know why this detective, he's got a thing for Raya.
Yeah.
They hooked up once.
So you're just saying, he just wanted to spend time with her?
I think so, but I think he's trying to make a name for himself, right? That's why he wants Danny to be a serial killer. Because Raya came in and talked to Danny and then left and said, I don't think there's anything there. I agree with the other guy. Let him detox, see what happens from it. It took a couple of days. And even then, she ended up going back because she really wanted this grant. So she went to lunch and said, let me talk to him.
So
she
it was
didn't
all selfish motivation.
Yes, and she didn't fully accept it until you did get a James McAvoy split from when Jack became Danny.
So this
and she got super excited.
A really kind of chance. Like, this is just coincidence that they discovered this kid.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job by when Raya said, look in my eyes and tell me what kind of person I am. Do I not want to help Danny? And Jack says, I think you're a little bit selfish and something else. And then says, but no, I don't think you want to hurt Danny. So you get to kind of see that, yes, Raya is very selfish. The only reason why she agreed to help Danny in the first place was because in order to keep her job on that college campus, she needed a grant.
Yeah.
And the only way to do it is to prove that he has dissociative disorder.
Okay.
So, but at the same time, you can see that she does kind of want to help people because she says the whole reason why she's doing this is so that she can help people like this.
Okay.
But at this moment, the whole reason is selfish.
Well, I was also kind of offended as an anorexia nervosa inpatient that she just deleted everything for the bulimics. She was just like, nah, whatever. They don't need any help. And I'm like, I think they do. I met a lot of nice ones in like the hospital and stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is the 70s. You know, they have a hard time of like separating them and thinking that like one issue envelops all of these different types. But like you said, there's so many different types.
No, I know. That's why I really liked the really tiny DSM-5 book being thrown on the desk because it's like when I was in the eating disorder institution, it was like I had anorexia nervosa and I was the only one of my type that's like very deep-seated and hospitalized and you have to stay there for a very long time. And then a lot of the bulimics, actually none of the bulimics that, I'm not saying all bulimics, but none of the bulimics that were in my facility even were hospitalized because your organs don't fail and it's not like, it's bad obviously. And there's teeth rot and there's things that don't happen with anorexia nervosa, the specific type that I have. But none of the girls that I was with, they were not underweight to an extreme death where they had hypothermia and heart failure and their bones were disintegrating and everything like I did. And then there also were like food averse kids. Not kids. It was just, there was only one girl and all they needed to do was give her like an anxiety medication and she started eating again. And she was like really bad and she refused food every single day at the dinner table. She would just say, no, I'm not eating. And they would like force a shake down her and they threatened the tube all the time. And I'm like anorexic here and I'm eating the food. And I thought, what girl, just do it. Like those shakes taste awful and they have more calories than like the food that we're eating. But she wasn't counting calories. Like she didn't care about that. She was just averse to eating food.
Yeah.
Then they gave her the anxiety pills and she was out like in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And she wasn't underweight or anything because she just ate the foods that like only the foods she wanted when she was at home. But so there was just so many different diverse amounts of eating disorders at the group place that I went to. And it's crazy that we didn't know that forever. Like I'm so lucky that I, having my disorder, live in a world where I was treated. I would have just died if I lived in the 70s.
Yeah, and that's why I like the fact that they showed that book because it shows that in this time that it happened, there was such a lack of understanding with psychology that they didn't know. They're still learning things. And so if, like how you said, like, oh, this wouldn't have happened, this isn't a thing, it may not be today, and you may not have treated a patient like this today, but back then they were still trying to figure out how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a trial thing. It might not be the way you would do it today because it's not helpful, but back then that's the only way they knew how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do get kind of like, why do you guys change these terms all the time? Like, just call us what we are. But you're right. Maybe it's just more insight makes them understand that that's not really even the proper thing to say.
Yeah, and it might be the reason why is because that word means this, and what you have is actually split off from that. So it is different in some way. So it can't be called that.
Yeah.
So that's why throughout this podcast I've been trying to remind you, yes, you're right, but this was the 70s. You need to be able to split today's rules and guidelines and the way we do things from the 70s. Things were completely different back then.
Yeah.
Everything is so different.
Mm-hmm. So Raya walks in and meets Danny. Danny is obviously being Johnny in this first interaction. He's acting all high. He's very confident and cocky. His attitude gives him away. But then, if you really couldn't tell, he gets out of his handcuffs with his little magic trick. Yep. And I thought, I think that Johnny is my favorite character.
Yes.
Like, he's super cool. I want to be around him. And Raya said that. She said, well, he's magnetic. Like, he's the most fun to watch. He's the most fun to be around.
Absolutely. I want to point out that Tom Holland did a great job acting as Johnny. He does a great job acting as his personalities. Now that we get to see him actually acting it out, he's no James McAvoy, but for being still kind of new to Hollywood, like he doesn't have the years that James McAvoy has, he does a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Raya is at dinner with her ex, and it seems like he was some sort of professor. Like it was some professor-student relationship gone serious.
Yeah. I think he's on the board of the committee of the college that she works at because he says how he can like put a good word in and get the grant. And she's like, I don't want your help. Like I'm doing this the right way.
Like this relationship started out as a conflict of interest. And so I'm not surprised, Raya, that you were continuing to have conflicting interests in your life. Like you started this.
Yeah. I also, one of the main reasons.
And she's reinforcing it by going out to dinner with this guy.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was getting at. One of the main reasons she went to dinner with him was because she wanted to talk to him about their kid, Ezra. And she said, you need to stop calling him.
But why don't you stop calling Greg?
Well, this is the thing. First, her mom had called him and then gave the phone to Ezra because Ezra needed a parent. Because during all of this, you're going to Danny's past about abuse and neglect and lack of love in his childhood. And then you get this mirrored thing of her neglecting her own kid for her career and not loving him the way she should. And it's becoming an issue where her kid's becoming violent. He threw his cereal across and said, I don't want to go to school.
So I like that, and I think that's another prediction that's pretty obvious, is that now Raya, especially at the end of the episode where she's really moved and she's crying, and she goes and she hugs her mom, where she was being very dismissive and kind of aggressive towards her mom, and then she goes and lays in her son's bed. She was kind of saying, well, he doesn't come and lay in my bed anymore, so he must not love me. And so she was almost punishing her son, which is so unhealthy. It's actually something very borderline, is punishing your child for acting the way a child should. That's not okay. You shouldn't get your own feelings hurt by your kid. Your kid is new to the world. Like, have a little bit more responsibility for your feelings. And so she goes into her kid's bed, which is now the right move. If your kid, you need to meet your child where they are, not force them to come and love you. And so her observing Danny and how, well, this kid's really messed up, kind of was an epiphany. I'm messing up my own kid, and I like that you caught that.
Yeah, I think one of the big messages from the end of this show is going to be basically like to parents saying you need to love your child more, you need to be in their life more, you need to
but not overlove them like candy.
No, absolutely. Don't overlove them like candy, but don't neglect them the way Raya has. Even for her career, you need to understand if you have a child, you need to sacrifice your career ambitions in order to support your child the way they need to be supported and loved. Otherwise, you might not have a Danny, but you could end up with a Danny. It just takes one little thing to go wrong to psychologically scar someone, and it might not be a big issue to you, but to them, they've played it in their head in a certain way that it hurts them so badly.
I ended up wanting to say that I like Greg because I love when a guy orders what you want, not without your permission, but like remembering exactly what you want.
Yeah, but you also need to remember he only did it because she threw a fit about how like you remember all this.
I know. I thought that was hot.
I'm allergic to
I know. I thought that was really hot that he did that.
Oh my goodness.
Raya's back at the ghost house where the police forgot to do their jobs, and Jack's glasses, I don't know if we didn't see it or I didn't notice it, they are on the note of the meet me for fish and chips at noon.
I think they were there. I just don't think it registered with us.
Yeah. But so we missed a clue. That could have been a really easy clue.
Yeah. We got the fish and chips notes. I know you got the identity of Jack and if he was real or not based on the note rather than the glasses.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Based on the fact that it was an English phrasing and Big Ben was in the background instead of looking at glasses and there's a guy drawn with glasses.
The exact glasses on the note. Yeah, we did the hard way. But That's the thing with this episode. Like you were saying, there was a lot of stuff they could have cut out. They replayed a lot of scenes.
Yeah, that's
in
what I
this
was
episode.
saying, is that we could have just cut all those and made this
Yeah.
one.
The only reason why I think it didn't bother me so much is because those scenes did different a little bit. It was obvious. These
I know
were
that the
full
context
length.
told a little bit of a different
Yeah.
story. But I think the story was pretty obvious anyway. That's what I'm saying. If you're not brain dead, then like I have brain damage and I still saw all of it. So if you were paying attention, you didn't need them to explicitly show you. You could pretty much observe.
Yeah, I think for me, it like I just like that they filled in the gaps. I like it when stuff does that. I don't know why. It's just like adds extra.
There is bird jump scare times 2. Less scary because we were farther away.
Yeah, and we knew it was coming.
So when the television show started to kind of spiral and it was like, Raya's putting together the pieces and Danny has DID and this is a new disorder and da-da-da-da, I was like, is this going to be the big reveal that Adam isn't a real person? Is that where we're going to end, like at the finale? Because what a disappointing waste of time for me.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking, I wonder if it's not going to be so much of a twist. If you, like, we're so used to shows having these big twists and these big reveals. What if the show's not even trying to do a twist? They're just trying to tell a story. There's no agenda behind a twist or reveal or surprise. They're just telling a story.
You should have a climax.
Yeah.
Your climax shouldn't have happened in episode 3.
Yeah, and that was the climax, right? You got the climax in this episode where they show now Danny acting all of the personalities. You no longer are seeing them as their own people. It's him sitting in a chair. His voice is changing. His inflections are changing. His accents are changing.
I just remember when I kept saying, I want to see Danny like in all these situations alone, walking around without his imaginary friends. I thought that would have been a better kind of da-da-da-da-da-da like reveal instead of just Raya looking at the same clues that we already saw her looking at with just different music now and at a faster pace.
Yeah. Well, now this makes me wonder if the book that they base off of isn't written from the perspective of this man's life. It was written from the psychologist who helped this guy. So it's going to start taking a twist where it's going to be less about Danny and start becoming more about Raya.
I disagree. I think that it's just going to be, this was Raya's episode and that's it. After Raya's leaving the ghost house, we see Candy for the first time in like a real person's vision. And I thought, this is so stupid. The writing, I kind of already touched on it in the beginning, but she's being so coy about Adam. And I just want her to be say like, no, he's an imaginary friend. Instead, she says, you're a psychologist, haha, like you haven't got it yet. It just was so patronizing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that he's fake. Especially like in that scene alone, they show the picture of like the drawn picture of Adam and Danny, but then the rest of the pictures are just Danny.
Like I wanted the mom to be like, no, I just hate Adam. That's why I have no photos of him.
The psychologist comment, she's not a psychologist, and she says it multiple times in the show. She's not a psychiatrist. She's not a psychologist. She's a professor. She specializes in psychology, but that doesn't mean that every professor who teaches psychology is a psychiatrist or psychologist.
I don't know really what the difference is, because there's so many different types of therapists and specialists that you can be. The girl coming and going from Ghost House is Annabelle, not Ariana. You were questioning it a little.
Not at that moment, but at the moment of when they said, well, that's her description, when they were like going back over the portfolio.
Yeah, you said.
And then, oh, maybe it's not her. And then I was like, and then you said, don't let the show fool you. And I said, oh yeah, you're probably right. She was probably described by Danny.
Yes. That's description of Ariana from our unreliable source.
They did the thing where they say that so-and-so is described by somebody. They don't say who, but if you pay enough attention or you stop wanting to prove your wife wrong, it's very obvious that it was described by Danny.
Yeah.
I just like to be the opposite of you, even if it means that I look like an idiot.
No, I love that because then we're always kind of like coming to the correct conclusion because I always have my strong opinion and you have your strong opinion and we kind of just suss out which one is more accurate rather than just kind of being in our own echo chamber of like we can't entertain anyone else's opinions.
Yeah, and sometimes it ends up working out where we find out, oh, I was right. But if I agreed with you right off the bat, we wouldn't have been like breaking it down and investigating so hardly and we would have got fooled.
Oh, so you're saying sometimes you do it to pretend just to piss me off?
Yeah.
When disheveled Candy is talking to Raya outside, I thought, has Marlon not come home? She describes Marlon as her husband, but wouldn't she have said like, hey, Danny tried to kill him. Wouldn't Marlon have come home and said, your kid shot me?
Yeah, my theory is that she finally accepts that the fact that Danny left was because of Marlon, so she leaves Marlon.
Why wouldn't she have walked over there and said, I kicked Marlon out?
Maybe because Danny just wants to be down there. I don't know. This is my idea. Because you're right. Why hasn't Marlon come back? I don't think they're together anymore. I don't think they're living together.
Did Danny have to pay rent because they said, well, he paid rent in cash. Was anyone even living there? The mom kind of made it seem like he was just squatting over there in an empty house.
He might have started out that way, and she might not have understood that it changed.
Okay.
She wasn't part of his life anymore.
Okay.
So she doesn't get to have the knowledge of what's going on. She's not living there.
Yeah.
And when asked if there was other people there, she does say, I don't know, there was a girl who was there a lot. And so it makes you think that's...
Annabelle. Or Ariana. They want to trick you. They want you to think Ariana, but it's Annabelle.
It's Annabelle. But I think...
Also, Candy, I don't think 3 times is like a lot.
And she says there's no way that her boy would have like shot up the place. That's not Danny. And so that's why I think they split. I don't think Marlon and her are together anymore.
Okay.
And that's why, because...
Marlon did look uglier and older, but so did Candy. Like when he got shot versus...
Yeah, and this is years ago. Like when asked during the interview how long he's lived in the house, he says 3 years, I think. 3 years, 4 years. So he's been there for...
3 years.
Yeah, so he's been there for...
People don't age a decade
bit.
in 3 years.
They do have to really stress out and you smoke as much as Candy does.
I think everybody smoked back then. That's why they were so skinny and they didn't have obesity problems in the United States. When Raya comes home and Ezra is watching television until 10 o'clock at night, she yells at him. And I wrote down, Raya could be a better mom, not the lack of time, but her parenting when she is there. She doesn't have a great, loving bedside manner.
No, and she says go to bed, it's 10.
It's just very
He
rude.
ignores her completely and then she just goes back to her work.
Yeah.
So it's
no discipline as well.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious that she doesn't really know what to do or really how to be a single mom, but she's also so invested in her career.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't make you a bad parent when you are busy all the time. Like, because her own mom is kind of getting on her for like, you should be here. That's not the issue. It's what you do with your time when you are home.
Yeah, because you
could walk in the door and be like, hi, Ezra, jump into my arms, like pick him up and swing him around.
I got irritated when her mom was like, you could be here more, because she's a single mom.
Yeah, she's trying to support this nice house, this very nice house.
If she was there more, she wouldn't have the money to support the kid.
So it's interesting to have these people slowly discover DID or split personality or multiple personality disorder. But the entire reveal is not as fun when you predicted it on day 1.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that is the reveal.
That's why. So I thought, I'm glad what you said. I agree a little bit. I think they could have shortened it into 1 episode of recap. But it is interesting that they fleshed out the lawyers and the criminal process. But where are the bodies?
I don't think there are any. Might not
We
be
saw them in the water.
I think it's his personality. We didn't see who they were.
So he's this fat, blubberous man?
Maybe.
I was thinking...
Bodies do swell up.
No, they do. But I was thinking, when the gases are released, though, they go back down.
Yeah.
They're not just... Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but these are memories of his, so maybe that's when he saw them.
I was wondering if the fattest guy that we saw floating in the water is the bartender. I don't know why. The bartender was like really nice to Danny, but I was just like, that's the only obese man that we've seen in this entire show.
I think it was just a body that was all gassed up and the gases haven't been released yet.
No, that was a fatty fat person.
Just saying. I think you're wrong.
Raya's second meeting with Danny is Jack. I'm so happy that I got to hear what I asked for in episode 4 of our podcast. Tom Holland, a British man acting like an American, pretending to be English. Inception of cringy voices.
Gross.
So we just had an evil woman, a true real life case, Letitia Stout, that pretended to have multiple personalities. Like in real life, a case, she killed her stepson. She wasn't real. She was faking it. It was absurd and awful. But this disorder is extremely rare. It's so rare that it's highly likely everyone that I've ever met will never encounter a person with this disorder. Criminals, however, like Letitia Stout, because they know about it, they want to plead insanity instead of just fessing up to them doing a really evil, awful thing. They use multiple personality or voices or it wasn't me, I'm not in my right state of mind to...
Yeah, well, that's because they don't have to do the hard time. They end up getting psychological help and living in a hospital or a mental institute rather than in a federal prison.
Yeah. We did get one secret. What is on the VCR security footage tape that the detective late at night comes and delivers to Raya.
Yeah, we don't get to see it.
But it does cause her to get access to Danny.
Yeah, and it is the shooting that happened.
How do you know that?
Because the gunshots that went off. So gunshots and there's 2 or 3 of them.
Oh, I was writing, so I didn't hear that or see the caption.
So you hear gunshots and stuff.
Okay, so it was just Danny shooting.
Yeah.
There was no girl.
Yeah,
that's the reveal.
The reveal, you don't get to see it, but I'm pretty sure the reveal is that it was just Danny shooting.
Okay, so now my prediction is not Adam. Ariana is the big reveal that the show thinks it's very clever because they made that whole episode about her. The show
Yeah.
thinks they're smart by saying Ariana is not one of just Danny's personalities, but it actually is going to turn out to be yes.
Well, and the detective said that thing you said about not being able to find her, I think you're right. And that's because of that. Now, I'm going to do what I usually do and go against you here. I'm going to say she is real, and the video is actually the shooting, but in the video you see Ari and she gets shot.
Oh, because it said he hurt one girl?
Yeah.
Ooh, but that would be completely different with no motive of being different in Danny's
We'll
memory.
find out. We'll find out.
When Raya is talking to Jack, she says something about Jung and Freud. I also prefer Carl Jung to Freud, but the shadow quote could literally be found on like a YouTube thumbnail title. It seemed like something they wanted to use as like, oh, Jack is the intelligent version. Everyone knows about Jung and the shadow self. It's just like Freud liked to touch peepees and was obsessed with that.
I just think that it was used in this because of the multiple personalities. The shadow, in this case, is his personality. So she's basically saying, like, Danny should know
But
his
the shadow self of
personalities.
Jung wouldn't really apply to someone that is so disordered like Danny.
No, but
a shadow self is within everybody in a normal function.
Yeah, but I think what is going on here is she doesn't quite understand the extent of it because this is the first time they're interacting. And then Jack says, well, Danny can't know about us. And she says, us.
It's
like,
just,
she's shocked that there's more than just Jack.
Yeah. I mean, because it's just like, you couldn't also put Danny into the id, ego, super ego, because where would these personalities fit?
Yeah.
Like, it's a basic way to understand human beings. If you have an outlier like Danny, if the consciousness is taking over, do you identify each consciousness as having id, ego, super ego? Are all the personalities in the ego? Are all of the personalities in the id?
Well,
what would you do?
That's the issue, is that you have these philosophers. They do these things and say these things based off of like society and their own
personal interaction with patients.
Yeah, and like you said, Danny is such an outlier, and people like him are such an outlier that you need to have a group of them to make a study of it.
Anyway, it seemed like they wanted to sound smart, but it just didn't apply here to me.
I think they did a good job of it because of that. Because like I said, she thought there was just two personalities, which you could argue. You have Danny and Jack. Jack is a shadow or Danny is a shadow. There's two people. And then he says us, and she's like, us. And then he says, are you sure we're not sitting on the opposite ends of the table, doctor?
But a shadow self is like, it's just like your id, basically.
Well, a shadow self can also like, based on today's standards.
It's not a whole different person.
No, but a shadow self is one's evil self.
No, it's not evil. Your shadow self is not evil. It's your underlying motivator. Raya convinces Jack to let Danny out. Good job, Tom Holland, for the one-take transforming from Jack to Danny, and then cute little tear.
Yeah, it was very subtle, and it was very... I liked how it wasn't instantaneous. It was subtle, it was slow, and then you get to see like this confidence go from Danny's face to like worry and like scared and not understanding where he is.
Yeah, it seemed almost painful.
Yeah.
Where are the bodies? Where are the bodies? I also wrote, I wish that Grandma, Raya's mom, would act like the prop groceries were heavy, because she picked up this brand new milk that she just bought from the grocery store like it was empty. It weighed absolutely nothing. Like my vanilla extract weighs more than that. She almost knocked it over when she touched it because it's just cardboard. You and I discussed this after the episode. I don't believe the crying and breaking down of Raya, because someone that sees psychological disorders and stuff, you almost have to be numb to it. It's like a doctor and death. And so the instance of a child being molested to a psychologist, it's very common because you're treating almost everybody that has a severe psychological disorder. It was triggered by a trauma. So you talk about trauma constantly.
Yeah. But like I've been saying this whole episode, she's not a psychologist. She doesn't deal with this every day. She basically teaches in the theory of this disorder, not actually like being with someone who has this disorder. So she's not dealing with this stuff day to day, every day.
I could have more believed what we were catching with her going home and hugging the mom, and then going and hugging her son, realizing that she is messing up in her parenting, and then maybe crying after that because she's like, oh, I feel bad. I feel remorse that I could be on this path, and I'm grateful that this kid came into my life and showed me the error of my ways through his bad parenting example, and now I get to learn and change my behavior to become a better mother, and then crying because of that understanding.
Yeah.
But crying immediately after someone recounts their rape story to you, it I've never had a therapist, and I've had several, ever show one bit of emotion.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at, is that she's not a therapist, she's not a psychologist, psychiatrist. She is dealing in theory. Danny is her very first patient, so she doesn't do this at all. She's never had anyone tell her this stuff. And right now she's seeing this kid who, in his mind, is innocent. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's been hurt in such a way that he's developed not one or two, but like 5, 6 different personalities to get away from this world that just constantly hurts him.
Yeah.
And then also you have that piled on top of the realization that she's not loving her child. She's picturing, in my head, I think she's picturing when Danny's explaining his rape, she's seeing her own child in that bar, not Danny, her child.
Yeah.
And so it's hurting her to see that and then know that all this is going on. I understand what you're saying. I agree. Like, therapists and psychiatrists do become numb to it, especially when they deal with it every day. But she doesn't. She doesn't have any. She just teaches in theory.
I think this is kind of a really good message in everybody's messed up. Everybody's had awful experiences. Everybody has trauma. I think every person regrets, has mistakes. I think that's why forgiveness is so important. Understanding is so important, because Raya has a lot of empathy and she's still making mistakes in her own life. Danny is innocent, but also doing bad things. I like that that's very real. People aren't just good and bad, and everybody carries something with them and it has shaped them.
Yeah, it's why you shouldn't judge people so harshly, especially when you first meet them, because they might be angry
or judge people
upset.
off of just one thing they say, or one interaction.
Yeah, you don't know what they've gone through or what they're going through in that moment, what's happening to them. They may have just lost somebody in their life, and so they're like angry at the world and they're taking it out on other people, or something else happened, or you don't have to think that what people do when they do wrong stuff is right, but you can understand why they're doing it. That doesn't mean you don't think they should be punished or anything, but to have a little understanding might, a little compassion for the person.
Yeah, like, you are super kind of gruff and tough and matter of fact, but you had to kind of develop like a really thick exterior that almost shoves people away, because you had a really rough childhood and then kidnapped and scared perpetually, and then foster system and drugs and really bad crime and everything in your whole life. So you had to like build your own protection, and people would come up to me, who I'm like the opposite, open, compassionate, and just let people hurt me. And they would say, like, why are you with such a kind of stoic, or not
like
stoic?
A douchebag?
No, because you never did that. It was more just like, he doesn't care about anyone. He is just so stoned, like, just pushes people away. Doesn't, and you've changed, obviously, but it's because they didn't know what had happened to you to make you like that.
Yeah, they didn't understand that I had lost like 3 or 4 people who I loved in my life by the age
and
of
you'd
18.
been mistreated and forgotten and left out in the cold and abused, and a whole bunch of things, starved, and so I see all of that, and I just kind of want to say, like, you could meet someone and like that in a really short interaction and think, oh, they're rude, oh, they're bad, oh, they're chip on their shoulder. There's a psychological basis for why everybody acts the way they do, think the way they do. We are all just matter, genetics, and circumstances, and that makes up the neurological connections that happen in our brain. It affects the way that we receive and perceive information that we take in. All different, all okay. No one's right or wrong. I'll get off my soapbox now and end this podcast, because I think we pretty well went through episode 6.
Yeah, it was a good episode. Episode 6 was definitely better than episode 5, I think.
I think they both could have been chopped up and made into one.
Yeah, I think they would have been great as one episode. I agree.
Yeah, more impactful, because now the pacing of this show has become boring. I definitely would have edited it differently.
Yeah, but it is the second to last episode, right? You have one more episode left, and then
I'm saying I would have edited the season as a whole differently.
Oh, I was getting at that. I think there's going to be another season, at least one more season, and so I think you had your like intenseness. Like, it was kind of slow, and it got really intense with all the personalities and stuff, and you're like learning all about Danny, and then it's slowed back down.
I understand what they were doing.
Yeah.
I'm saying wasn't effective and could have been better.
Yeah, I agree. I don't agree. I see what you're saying there. I'm saying I like the way they did it because I'm ready for a second season. You're saying you just want.
Oh, I'm not watching a second season if this has a second season.
Oh,
it's not good enough for me to do that.
You have to now. You started this. So
I started a podcast in season 1.
Yeah, and you got to finish it out.
I'll finish season 1.
No, finish it out.
Do your own podcast.
Fine, I will.
You don't know how to edit or what to do here.
That's a lie. I did YouTube for a little bit.
Hopefully we didn't lose you. We will see you next week, Friday or Saturday. for the second to last episode of
Oh,
The
there's
Crowded Room.
2 more left?
I thought so.
Oh.
We will see
Yeah,
if
we'll
it doesn't
find out.
end next week.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Thank you for listening to our stupid show. We're the Screen Stoops. Goodbye.
Later.